The unmistakable sound of metal striking asphalt echoed across Samuel Ward's withering cornfields. He watched from his sagging porch as the cyclist tried desperately to restart her journey, her bike chain hanging uselessly. Little did he know that this stranded stranger would soon present him with a check that would save his family's century-old farm and transform the dying land into something revolutionary. Their chance encounter would not only rescue his livelihood, but spark something neither of them expected: a partnership that would change sustainable agriculture forever. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Tomorrow's story will leave you speechless, so you won't want to miss it. Samuel Ward's weathered hands gripped the porch railing as he squinted through the afternoon sun. Dust particles danced in the golden light, a perpetual reminder of the drought that had been slowly killing his farm for 3 consecutive seasons. The cracked earth of his fields spread out before him like an accusation of failure. At 43, Samuel's face carried the lines of a man who had spent his life battling the elements, and lately, losing. His gaze drifted toward the rural highway that bordered his property, where a figure in bright cycling gear was bent over a mountain bike. Even from this distance, Samuel could recognize the universal posture of mechanical frustration. The cyclist attempted to reattach what appeared to be a broken chain, her movements becoming increasingly agitated. Samuel sighed, pushing himself away from the railing. He had his own problems, bills piling up on the kitchen table, foreclosure notices arriving with increasing frequency, and fields that produced less with each passing season despite his best efforts. The stranger's problem wasn't his concern. And yet, something about the way she stubbornly persisted, wiping sweat from her brow as she refused to give up on her journey, resonated with him. If nothing else, he understood stubborn persistence in the face of mounting odds. "Dad?" His daughter Lily appeared at the screen door, her 12-year-old frame silhouetted against the dim interior of their farmhouse. "Who's that?" "Just someone having bike trouble," Samuel replied, already walking toward the steps. "I'm going to see if I can help." "We have trouble too," Lily said matter-of-factly, with that particular brand of unfiltered honesty that children her age specialized in. "Bank called again while you were in the fields." Samuel nodded, his jaw tightening. "I know, sweetie, I'll handle it." As he crossed the dusty front yard, Samuel mentally cataloged what spare parts he might have in the barn that could help. Years of maintaining farm equipment had made him skilled at improvising fixes, though lately, those skills were being stretched to their limit as he struggled to keep ancient machinery operational without the funds for proper replacement parts. The cyclist straightened as he approached, pushing back a stray lock of dark hair that had escaped her helmet. Her face was flushed from exertion and frustration, but her eyes were alert and curious as she assessed him. "Bike trouble?" Samuel asked unnecessarily, nodding toward the disconnected chain dangling from her expensive-looking mountain bike. "Chain snapped, and my derailleur is bent," she said, extending a grease-smudged hand. "I'm Olivia Chen. I was hoping to make it to Riverdale by sunset, but that's not looking promising now." "Samuel Ward," he replied, shaking her hand. "Riverdale's still 20 miles down the road. That's a fair distance, especially with a busted bike." Olivia sighed, looking down at her bike, with something approaching betrayal. "I've been on the road for weeks, biking across the country for a research project. This is the first mechanical issue I've had." She glanced around at the surrounding landscape, taking in the rural isolation. "I don't suppose there's a bike shop nearby?" Samuel almost laughed at the idea. "Nothing within 30 miles, and they'd be closed by now anyway. But I might have some parts in my barn that could work as a temporary fix, if you're willing to try a farmer's solution rather than a professional one." Something in Olivia's expression shifted a subtle recalibration of her assessment of him. "I'd appreciate any help. I can pay you for your time and materials." "No need," Samuel said automatically, although every penny counted these days. Some habits of rural hospitality were too deeply ingrained to break, even when facing financial ruin. "Let's see what we can do." As they walked toward the farm buildings, Olivia wheeling her disabled bike beside her, Samuel became acutely aware of how his property must look to an outsider. The paint peeling from the farmhouse, the sagging roof of the barn, the withered cornfields stretching to the horizon, all shouting neglect and failure to anyone who cared to look. "Beautiful land," Olivia commented, and for a moment, Samuel thought she was being sarcastic, until he saw the genuine appreciation in her eyes as she took in the rolling contours of his property. "How long have you been farming here?" "Farm's been in the family for almost a century," Samuel said, a note of pride creeping into his voice despite everything. "My great-grandfather built that house. I'm the fourth generation to work this land." "It's quite a legacy," Olivia said, and something in her tone made Samuel glance at her sharply. There was no pity there, just a thoughtful assessment. Lily came bounding across the yard to meet them, curiosity overcoming her usual shyness around strangers. "Did your bike break?" "Dad can fix anything. He's always fixing our tractor even though it's super old." "Lily," Samuel said, feeling the heat of embarrassment rising in his neck. But Olivia just smiled. "That's exactly what I'm hoping. I'm Olivia." "I'm Lily. Are you biking across America? My teacher sent people do that sometimes." "Close," Olivia said. "I'm biking across several states for a research project I'm working on." "What kind of research?" Lily asked, falling into step beside them as they approached the barn. "I study sustainable agriculture," Olivia explained. "How to grow food in ways that are good for the land and can withstand changing climate conditions." Samuel felt a prickle of interest despite himself. He'd read about sustainable farming techniques in agricultural journals at the library, where he sometimes went to use the internet since they'd had to cancel their home service to save money. The methods sounded promising, but required initial investments that were far beyond his means. "Here we are," he said, pushing open the barn door. The scent of aged wood, dust, and machine oil enveloped them as they entered the cavernous space. Farm equipment in various states of repair filled the concrete floor, while overhead, the massive wooden beams that had supported the structure for generations disappeared into shadows. "Impressive space," Olivia said, wheeling her bike to the workbench Samuel indicated. "It's seen better days," Samuel admitted, rummaging through a drawer of miscellaneous parts. "But it still serves its purpose." "Sometimes the oldest structures are the most adaptable," Olivia said, running her hand along a beam that Samuel's grandfather had hewn by hand. "They've already proven they can withstand the test of time." Samuel found himself unexpectedly warmed by her perspective. Most visitors saw only decay where he still saw potential, even if that potential was increasingly difficult to realize. "Here we go," he said, producing a length of chain that looked compatible with her bike. "Let's see if we can get you back on the road." As Samuel worked on the bike, Lily peppered Olivia with questions about her journey and her work. Olivia answered each one thoughtfully, explaining complex concepts in terms the 12-year-old could understand. Samuel found himself listening closely as she described different agricultural approaches she'd observed across the country. "The most interesting farms I've visited are finding ways to work with nature rather than against it," Olivia was saying as Samuel finished reconnecting her chain. "They're using cover crops to build soil health instead of just relying on chemical fertilizers, implementing water conservation techniques, and diversifying what they grow." "Is that really possible on a larger scale?" Samuel asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. "Sounds like the kind of approach that works for hobby farms, but not for serious production." "Actually," Olivia said, her eyes lighting up at his question, "some of the largest agricultural operations in the country are transitioning to these methods. They found that over time, it reduces their input costs and makes their land more resilient to extreme weather events. The initial transition can be challenging, but the long-term benefits are substantial." End quote. Samuel nodded noncommittally, tightening the last bolt on her derailleur. The conversation was straying dangerously close to his own failures, his inability to adapt quickly enough to changing market conditions and weather patterns, his stubborn adherence to methods that no longer seemed effective. "There you go," he said, stepping back from the bike. "It's not perfect, but it should get you to Riverdale. You might want to have a professional look at it there before you continue your journey." Olivia tested the pedals, nodding appreciatively as the chain moved smoothly. "This is excellent work. Are you sure I can't pay you something?" "Just pay it forward next time you come across someone who needs help," Samuel said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Dad always says that," Lily chimed in. But the bank doesn't take pay it forward as payment. Lily, Samuel said sharply, embarrassment flooding him. It's okay, Olivia said quickly, looking between them. She's right. Kindness doesn't pay the bills. She hesitated, then asked, Have you been having a difficult season? Samuel's instinct was to deflect, to maintain the facade of managing just fine. But something in Olivia's direct gaze made the pretense seem pointless. 3 difficult seasons in a row, he admitted. The drought hit us hard, and commodity prices fell just when input costs were rising. It's a squeeze a lot of farmers are feeling, Olivia said, nodding. The conventional system doesn't leave much room for error or adaptation. No, it doesn't, Samuel agreed, surprised by her understanding. Most city people he encountered had simplistic views of farming, either romanticizing it or dismissing its challenges entirely. Well, I should get moving if I want to reach Riverdale before dark, Olivia said, wheeling her bike toward the barn entrance. Thank you again for your help. Want some water for the road? Lily asked. Dad makes sure I never ride my bike without water, even just to my friend's house. Olivia smiled. That would be great, actually. I was running low. While Lily ran to the house to fetch water, Samuel walked with Olivia back to the road, an unexpected reluctance settling over him. Their conversation had been the most engaging he'd had in months, even if it had occasionally veered into uncomfortable territory. Your daughter's wonderful, Olivia said. Very perceptive. Too perceptive sometimes, Samuel said with a rueful smile. She worries more than a 12-year-old should. Kids absorb everything around them, Olivia agreed. But she clearly adores you. Before Samuel could respond, Lily returned with a filled water bottle, which Olivia accepted gratefully. If you're studying farming, you should come back and see our farm, Lily said. Dad could show you all our fields and explain everything. He knows a lot. Samuel felt a flush of embarrassment again. Lily, I'm sure Ms. Chen has more important farms to visit than ours. Actually, Olivia said, studying him with those sharp, intelligent eyes. I'd be interested in seeing your operation, if you wouldn't mind. I'm fascinated by farms in transition, and it sounds like you're at an inflection point. Samuel hesitated, torn between pride and the desire to avoid scrutiny of his struggling farm. But Lily was looking up at him hopefully, and he found himself nodding. If you're really interested, sure. We don't have much to show right now, but… Perfect, Olivia said, securing her helmet. I have meetings in Riverdale tomorrow morning, but I could come by in the afternoon if that works for you. We'll be here, Samuel said, surprised to find himself looking forward to it. They watched as Olivia mounted her bike and pedaled away, her bright cycling gear a splash of color against the dusty road. Samuel felt an odd mixture of emotions as she disappeared around the bend, a residual curiosity about this woman who crossed the country on a bicycle studying farming methods, combined with a nagging sense that he'd revealed too much of his vulnerability to a stranger. I like her, Lily declared as they walked back to the house. She's smart, and she actually listened when I talked. She seems nice, Samuel agreed cautiously. Do you think she'll really come back tomorrow? Lily asked. Samuel glanced down the empty road. I'm not sure, sweetie. People get busy. But if she does, we'll give her a proper tour. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Samuel sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating the stack of bills beside it. He'd been putting off calling the bank again, knowing they had little patience left for his promises of future improvements. The farm had been profitable once, but each year brought new challenges: unpredictable weather, rising costs, falling crop prices, and the crushing weight of equipment loans that had seemed manageable when he'd taken them out. On impulse, he typed Olivia Chen Agriculture into the search engine. The results made him sit back in his chair, eyebrows raised. Dr. Olivia Chen was considerably more than a cycling enthusiast with an interest in farming. She was a leading researcher at the Agricultural Sustainability Institute, with multiple published papers on regenerative agriculture and climate resilience for farms. Her photograph showed her in the same direct, engaging posture he'd witnessed today, though dressed in professional attire rather than cycling gear. More intriguing were the articles about the grant program she administered, substantial funding for farms willing to transition to more sustainable practices, with a focus on those in climate-vulnerable regions. The program provided not just financial support, but technical assistance and ongoing guidance. Samuel closed the laptop, his mind racing. Was it possible that their chance encounter wasn't about a broken bike at all? Had Olivia somehow known about his farm before she arrived? The coincidence seemed too perfect. A sustainability expert with access to grant funding appearing just when he was on the verge of losing everything. But the more he thought about it, the less sense that made. How would she have known about his specific situation? And why would someone with her credentials resort to such an elaborate pretense? If she wanted to approach him about her program, she could have simply contacted him directly. No, the broken bike had been genuine enough. What remained to be seen was whether her interest in his farm was merely professional courtesy or something more. Samuel rose from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit fields. For the first time in months, he felt a tentative flicker of hope, not enough to truly believe that things might change, but enough to make him curious about what tomorrow might bring. The morning dawned clear and hot, the kind of relentless summer heat that seemed to shimmer above the parched fields. Samuel rose before sunrise, as he had every day since he was old enough to work alongside his father. The routine of farm life continued regardless of financial troubles or unexpected visitors. Animals needed tending, equipment needed maintenance, and whatever crops had survived the drought needed attention. By mid-morning, the temperature had climbed to uncomfortable levels. Samuel worked methodically through his tasks, but his mind kept returning to Olivia Chen and her research. During a break, he drove to the public library in town, using their internet connection to read several of her published papers. The concepts she advocated weren't entirely new to him, but the systematic approach and data-driven results were impressive. Farms that had implemented her recommended practices showed marked improvements in soil health and water retention, and many had become more profitable within 3 years. When he returned home, Samuel found himself looking at his land with new eyes, trying to imagine what someone like Olivia might see in it. Not just the present reality of stressed crops and eroded soil, but the potential that might still exist beneath the surface. Lily returned from her summer school program full of excitement about the possibility of Olivia's visit. "I told my friends a scientist is coming to see our farm," she said, as she helped Samuel repair a fence in the relative cool of the late afternoon. "Madison didn't believe me, but I told her you fixed a bike for a real agricultural researcher." "Let's not get too excited," Samuel cautioned, hammering a post into the hard ground. "She might not show up, and even if she does, it's probably just professional curiosity. She visits lots of farms for her research." "But she might help us," Lily persisted. "She knows about farms that don't need as much water or chemicals. She told me so." Samuel paused in his work, looking at his daughter's hopeful face. He had always tried to shield her from the worst of his worries about the farm, but children were perceptive. She knew more than he realized about their precarious situation. "Lily," he said gently, "even if Dr. Chen has good ideas, implementing them takes money we don't have right now. There's no quick fix for what we're facing." "But what if?" The sound of tires on gravel interrupted her, and they both turned to see a modest sedan pulling into their driveway. Samuel straightened, shading his eyes against the sun, as Olivia Chen emerged from the car, dressed in lightweight hiking pants and a professional-looking button-up shirt rolled at the sleeves. "She came!" Lily exclaimed, already running toward the driveway. Samuel followed more slowly, aware of his sweat-stained work clothes and the general disarray of the farmyard. He hadn't truly expected her to return, and had made no preparations for a visitor. "Good afternoon," Olivia called, smiling as Lily reached her. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Just fixing fences," Samuel said, extending his hand. "Welcome back to Ward Farm." "Thank you for agreeing to show me around," Olivia said, shaking his hand. "I've been looking forward to seeing more of your operation." Samuel noted that she carried a professional backpack and what appeared to be soil testing equipment. This was clearly more than a casual visit motivated by politeness. "I have to warn you," he said, as they walked toward the fields. Things aren't exactly thriving right now. The drought's been hard on us, and I haven't had the resources to implement the kind of irrigation upgrades we need. That's actually perfect for what I'm interested in seeing, Olivia said. Resilience under stress conditions tells us a lot about both the farming methods and the underlying soil health. For the next 2 hours, Samuel showed Olivia around the farm, explaining his crop rotation practices. The challenges he'd faced with pest management since trying to reduce chemical inputs, and the areas where erosion had become a serious problem during heavy rainfall events. Lily trailed behind them, occasionally adding her own observations about the farm's features. Throughout the tour, Olivia asked thoughtful questions, occasionally stopping to take soil samples or photographs of particular features. She showed none of the judgments Samuel had feared, only professional interest and occasional enthusiasm about specific aspects of the land. Your soil structure isn't as degraded as I would have expected given the challenges you've described, she said, examining a handful of dirt from one of the lower fields. There's still good potential here. Potential doesn't pay the mortgage, Samuel said, more sharply than he'd intended. Olivia nodded, unruffled by his tone. No, it doesn't. But it does mean that the right interventions could have significant positive impacts relatively quickly. As they reached the highest point of the property, Olivia stopped to survey the entire farm, her expression thoughtful. Below them, the patchwork of struggling fields stretched toward the distant road. The farm buildings clustered around the old house, weathered but still solid at the center of the land. You've maintained this place through some extremely difficult circumstances, Olivia said. That's no small achievement given the economic pressures on family farms right now. Maintained is a generous word, Samuel said, looking over his property with a critical eye. More like delayed the inevitable. Is that what you really believe? Olivia asked, turning to face him directly. That this farm's trajectory can't be changed? Samuel felt a flare of defensiveness. I've tried everything I can afford to try. I've read the research. I know there are better methods out there, but they all require capital investment I don't have. The banks aren't interested in lending more to a farm that's already struggling. What if capital wasn't the immediate obstacle? Olivia asked, her tone measured. If you had the resources, what would you do differently? That's a big if, Samuel said with a short laugh. Humor me, Olivia insisted. As a researcher, I'm genuinely curious about how farmers like you would approach these challenges if financial constraints were reduced. Samuel gazed across his land, allowing himself to imagine the possibilities for the first time in years. I'd start with water management, he said finally. Contour plowing, swales to capture and slow runoff, maybe even a small-scale water catchment system for the periods between rains. Then I'd work on rebuilding the soil cover crops, compost application, maybe try some of the biochar methods I've read about, end quote. As he spoke, the ideas he'd been collecting over years of reading and quiet observation began to flow more freely. He described the diversification he'd been considering adding vegetable production to supplement the traditional row crops, integrating some livestock in a rotational grazing system to build soil health, planting crop, windbreaks to reduce erosion. Olivia listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions or suggesting refinements to his ideas. Lily sat cross-legged nearby, watching the exchange with obvious interest. Those are all sound approaches, Olivia said, when he finally ran out of ideas. You've clearly given this a lot of thought. Thinking is free, Samuel said with a wry smile. It's the doing that costs money. Olivia adjusted her sunglasses, studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Samuel, I have a proposition for you, and I want you to hear me out before you respond. Samuel felt a sudden wariness. What kind of proposition? The research institute I work for has a program that partners with farms in climate-vulnerable regions to implement and study sustainable transition methods, Olivia explained. We provide grant funding for the implementation of specific practices, technical support throughout the process, and ongoing monitoring to document the results. Samuel frowned. And, in return? We ask for data transparency, regular soil testing, crop yield information. water usage metrics, and your participation in the documentation process. We also ask that you be willing to occasionally host other farmers or researchers who want to learn from your experience. You're talking about turning my farm into an experiment, Samuel said, his tone neutral as he tried to process what she was suggesting. I prefer to think of it as a demonstration project, Olivia said. Everything we'd implement would be evidence-based practices with proven track records. The experimental aspect is seeing how they work in combination on your specific land, with your knowledge and management. And if it fails? The grant isn't a loan, Olivia said firmly. You wouldn't be required to repay it if the methods don't produce the expected results. Our goal is to develop resilient farming systems, not to create additional financial stress for participating farmers. Samuel shook his head, struggling to process the sudden reversal of his fortunes. Why my farm? There must be hundreds of farms in similar situations across the region. There are, Olivia acknowledged. And we're working with several others already. But your farm has a particular combination of characteristics we're interested in: soil types, topography, crop history, and proximity to water resources. Plus, she added with a slight smile, not every farmer demonstrates the kind of comprehensive understanding of potential solutions that you just shared. Is that why your bike broke down near our farm? Willie asked suddenly. Were you already planning to talk to Dad? Olivia laughed, the sound bright against the afternoon quiet. That was completely unplanned, I promise. But I do believe in happy coincidences. Breaking down here allowed me to meet you both and learn about your farm in a way that might not have happened otherwise. How much, Kerr? Funding, are we talking about? Samuel asked, still cautious. Enough to implement all the major interventions you described, plus some additional components our technical team would recommend, Olivia said. The exact amount would depend on the final project design, but it would be substantial. We're serious about creating viable models for agricultural transition. Samuel looked out over his land again, trying to imagine it transformed the eroded gullies, healed diverse crops growing where monocultures now struggled, the soil slowly rebuilding its natural vitality. It was a vision he carried privately for years, never expecting it to materialize. I'd need to see the details, he said finally. The terms, expectations, everything spelled out. Of course, Olivia agreed immediately. I can provide all of that. We don't want farmers entering this program without complete understanding and informed consent. Can I ask one question? Samuel said, his voice more vulnerable than he intended. How did you find me? Really? Olivia's expression softened. The broken bike was genuine. Ask my mechanic in Riverdale who had to properly repair it this morning. But when you mentioned your farm had been in your family for generations and was now struggling, I recognized the pattern I've seen across the country. When I got to my hotel last night, I looked up farms in the area and found yours. The satellite imagery showed signs of the challenges you've described, and your location made you a good candidate for our program. So, it was just luck? Serendipity, Olivia corrected. The right factors converging at the right moment. But I wouldn't have considered your farm if our conversation hadn't revealed your knowledge and commitment. Those are the intangible factors that make or break these transition projects. And if I say yes? Samuel asked, still struggling to believe the opportunity being presented. Then we begin the formal application process, Olivia said. Site assessments, detailed planning, budget development. It takes a few weeks to finalize, but we could have initial interventions underway before the end of the growing season. Lily had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, but now she looked up at her father with earnest eyes. Dad, remember what Grandpa always said about how the land will provide if we listen to what it needs? Samuel felt his throat tighten. His father had been an intuitive farmer, always more attuned to the subtle language of the soil and weather, and to market trends or agricultural technologies. Before his death 5 years ago, he had expressed concerns about the direction modern farming was taking, though he had never criticized Samuel's attempts to keep the farm viable through conventional means. I remember, Lily, he said softly. I think this is the land providing, she said with the simple confidence of youth. Through Olivia's bike breaking. Olivia smiled at Lily. That's a lovely way to think about it. Samuel took a deep breath, feeling as though he stood at a crossroads that had appeared suddenly out of nowhere. I'll need to think about this, he said. Talk it through. Ask questions. This isn't a small decision. Of course, Olivia said. I wouldn't expect an immediate answer. Here's my card, with all my contact information. I'll also email you the program overview and some case studies from other farms we're working with. As they walked back toward the house, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the fields, Samuel found himself seeing glimpses of what could be cover crops growing between his main plantings, swales, capturing precious rainfall, windbreaks offering protection against the increasingly erratic weather patterns. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond mere survival. One where the farm could thrive again while healing the land it depended on. Back at the farmhouse, Lily insisted on offering Olivia some of the lemonade she had made that morning. As they sat on the porch, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Olivia's cycling adventures across the country, Lily's science project on local bird species, Samuel's grandfather's stories about the early days of the farm. I should get going, Olivia said eventually, checking her watch. I have an early meeting tomorrow in Riverdale before I head to my next site visit. Will you come back? Lily asked. If your dad decides to move forward with the project, I'll definitely be back, Olivia said, smiling at her. I'd be assigned as the primary research liaison for your farm. Even if we don't, Samuel found himself saying, you're welcome to stop by if you're passing through again. Maybe with a better maintained bike next time. Olivia laughed. I'll keep that in mind. And I'll have those materials to you by tomorrow morning. After Olivia had driven away, Samuel and Lily stood in the yard, watching the dust settle on the driveway. Are you going to say yes, Dad? Lily asked. Samuel put his arm around her shoulders. I don't know yet, sweetie. It's a big change from how we've been doing things. But we need a big change, Lily said, with the clear logic of childhood. The way we're doing things isn't working. You said so yourself. Samuel nodded slowly, unable to argue with her assessment. Let's see what the detailed proposal looks like. Then we'll decide. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Samuel sat at his computer, researching the Agricultural Sustainability Institute and their farm transition program more thoroughly. Everything he found supported what Olivia had told them. The program was well established, with published results from participating farms showing significant improvements in both environmental and economic metrics over time. He also found himself watching videos of Olivia presenting research findings at agricultural conferences. Her passion for the work was evident, as was her respect for the farmers she partnered with. She never portrayed them as problems to be solved or backwards thinkers resisting change, but as essential collaborators in developing resilient food systems. 3:20 days later, Samuel sat across from Olivia in a coffee shop in town, reviewing the detailed proposal she had prepared for Ward Farm. The document outlined a 3-year transition plan, with specific interventions scheduled seasonally and a substantial grant to cover the costs. This is more comprehensive than I expected, Samuel admitted, looking up from the pages. We've learned that piecemeal approaches often don't create the systemic changes needed, Olivia explained. Everything is interconnected. On a farm, water management affects soil health, which affects plant resilience, which affects pest pressure, and so on. Addressing multiple aspects simultaneously tends to create more stable and successful transitions. And you really think this can work on my farm? Samuel asked, still harboring doubt despite the compelling evidence before him. I do, Olivia said without hesitation. Your land has good bones, as they say in real estate. The underlying potential is there, just waiting for the right conditions to express itself. Samuel tapped his fingers on the table, weighing his final concerns. What happens after the 3 years? If I've completely changed my farming methods and the funding ends, by that point, the new systems should be self-sustaining, Olivia said. The initial investment is higher, but the ongoing costs are typically lower than conventional farming. Fewer inputs needed, more natural processes handling functions you currently pay for chemically or mechanically. Of course, we don't disappear after 3 years. There's ongoing support available, just at a reduced intensity. Samuel nodded slowly, then reached for the pen she had placed beside the contract. Lily's going to be thrilled, he said, signing his name. She's been campaigning for this since you left the other day. She's a remarkable girl, Olivia said, smiling. Very passionate about your farm. It's the only home she's ever known, Samuel said, pushing the signed contract back across the table. I want it to be something she can be proud of, whether or not she eventually decides to farm herself. I think you're well on your way to making that happen, Olivia said, extending her hand to shake his. Welcome to the program, Samuel. I'm looking forward to working with you. As they walked out of the coffee shop together, Samuel felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, not just the immediate financial pressure, though that relief was significant, but the deeper burden of trying to make an increasingly unworkable system function against mounting odds. For the first time in years, he felt aligned with his deepest values as a farmer. Stewardship of the land, building health rather than extracting value, creating something sustainable to pass on to the next generation. When do we start? He asked as they reached their vehicles. The technical assessment team can be at your farm next Tuesday, Olivia said. After that, things will move quickly. We want to get some interventions in place before the fall rains begin. Samuel nodded, a new energy coursing through him. I'll be ready. The transformation of Ward Farm began with water. The technical team that arrived the following week spent days surveying the property, identifying the natural water flow patterns, and designing a system of swales, berms, and small ponds to capture and slow rainfall when it came. Heavy equipment operators carved gentle curves into the landscape, following the contours of the land to maximize water retention. Samuel worked alongside them, learning the principles behind each intervention and contributing his intimate knowledge of how water had historically moved across his fields. Lily came home from school each day, eager to see the progress, asking endless questions about the changes taking place. It looks so different already, she marveled one evening as they stood on the porch, surveying the newly contoured lower field. Like someone drew curves on the land. That's exactly what we did, Samuel said, working with the land's natural shape instead of against it. Olivia visited weekly during this initial phase, coordinating between the technical team and Samuel, ensuring that the implementations matched both the scientific best practices and his vision for the farm. She often stayed for dinner, entertaining Lily with stories of innovative farms she had visited around the country while discussing technical details with Samuel. As the weeks passed, Samuel found himself increasingly looking forward to her visits. Beyond her professional expertise, he enjoyed her company, her quick wit, her genuine interest in his perspective. The way she engaged with Lily as an equal, rather than talking down to her. The first true test of the new water management system came in October, when 3 days of steady rain fell across the region. In previous years, such rainfall would have caused significant erosion, washing away precious topsoil and creating new gullies across the fields. Samuel spent the first day of the storm anxiously monitoring the newly installed systems, watching how water flowed through the swales and collected in the strategic basins. It's working, he told Lily in amazement as they stood under umbrellas, watching water curve gently along a contoured path rather than rushing straight downhill. Look how slow the water is moving now. It's sinking in instead of running off. By the storm's end, the farm had absorbed substantially more moisture than it would have previously, and the erosion was minimal. More importantly, the water would remain in the soil far longer, creating a reservoir of moisture for crops in the drier periods to come. The land remembers water, Olivia explained during her post-storm visit, as they toured the property assessing the system's performance. Each time you allow it to absorb rainfall properly, you're rebuilding its capacity to hold moisture. Think of it as reopening pathways that were compacted or damaged over years of conventional tilling. Following the water management implementation, the focus shifted to soil health. Cover crops were planted in the fields that would otherwise have lain bare through the winter months. Mixtures of clover, vetch, rye, and radishes designed to protect the soil surface while sending diverse root structures deep into the ground. These plants would add organic matter, fix nitrogen, break up compaction, and create habitat for beneficial soil organisms. "The soil is the foundation of everything," Olivia said, as she and Samuel walked through a field of emerging green shoots one chilly November morning. "Healthy soil grows healthy plants that require fewer external inputs and are more resilient to stress." "My grandfather used to say something similar," Samuel recalled. "He called the soil the farm's true bank account, said if you kept making withdrawals without deposits, eventually you'd go broke." "Wise man," Olivia said, smiling. "The modern agricultural system often treats soil like an inert medium to hold plants upright while we feed them synthetically, but it's actually an incredibly complex living ecosystem." Winter brought a slower pace to the transition process, but not a halt. Samuel attended workshops on regenerative farming techniques, sometimes with Olivia presenting, sometimes with other experts from her network. He began visualizing the next season's plantings, planning for greater diversity than he had ever attempted. The Christmas season arrived with a sense of cautious optimism that had been absent from the Ward household for years. For the first time since his wife had left 7 years earlier, Samuel put up a tree and decorated the house, wanting to create a festive atmosphere for Lily. Olivia joined them for Christmas dinner, bringing along homemade pie and small gifts, a book on bird identification for Lily, and a rainfall gauge with integrated soil moisture sensors for Samuel. "This is a prototype our tech team is developing," she explained as he unwrapped it. "They're looking for farmer feedback before finalizing the design." "Are you saying I'm a test subject?" Samuel asked with mock offense. "I'm saying your opinion matters," Olivia corrected, her eyes meeting his with warmth that made his heart beat a little faster. After dinner, while Lily was absorbed in her new book by the fire, Samuel and Olivia stood on the porch, watching snow begin to fall on the transformed landscape. "Thank you," Samuel said quietly. "Not just for the program, but for seeing potential here when even I was starting to lose sight of it." "You never lost sight of it," Olivia countered. "You just lacked the resources to make it happen. There's a difference." Samuel nodded, accepting her perspective. "Still, meeting you changed everything. I was days away from calling the bank to discuss selling the property when your chain broke." "Serendipity," Olivia said, echoing her word from their first serious conversation about Purd. "The farm? But you've done all the real work. I've just been a facilitator. A rather persistent facilitator," Samuel said with a smile. "Persistence is an occupational requirement in my field," Olivia admitted. "Agricultural change doesn't happen overnight." As they stood watching the snow, Samuel became acutely aware of her presence beside him, the gentle scent of her perfume. The way she tucked her hands into her sweater sleeves against the cold, the slight tilt of her head as she observed the winter landscape. Something had been growing between them over these months of working together, something neither had acknowledged directly. "Will you still be involved with the farm once the major implementations are complete?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course," Olivia said. "The monitoring and support phase is just as important as the initial transition. Unless," she added, glancing at him, "you'd prefer a different liaison from the Institute." "No," Samuel said quickly, then more measured. "No, I value your perspective. And Lily would mutiny if you disappeared." Olivia smiled. "Just Lily?" Before Samuel could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much, Lily called from inside about hot chocolate, and the moment passed. But something had shifted, a possibility acknowledged, if not yet explored. Spring arrived with renewed energy and activity on the farm. The cover crops were incorporated into the soil, adding organic matter and nutrients for the coming growing season. New equipment arrived: precision seeders, designed to work with minimal soil disturbance, tools for managing the diverse cropping systems being implemented. Samuel found himself busier than ever, but with a different quality to his work. Instead of fighting against declining yields and mounting problems, he was building something new, collaborating with natural processes rather than trying to override them. The stress of potential failure still existed, but it was balanced by the excitement of creating a more resilient system. Olivia's visits continued regularly, though her travel schedule sometimes took her away for weeks at a time. Samuel found himself tracking the days until her return, preparing questions and observations to share with her, wanting to impress her with his progress. "You've become the program's star pupil," she teased during a May visit, as they inspected the diverse plantings now emerging in what had previously been a monoculture field. "The other researchers are getting jealous of how much time I spend here." "Well, we have the advantage of serendipity," Samuel replied, referencing their running joke about her broken bicycle. "The other farms probably had boring, conventional introductions." The summer growing season revealed the first truly visible results of their work. Fields that had struggled to produce consistent crops now flourished with diverse plantings, traditional row crops, interspersed with supporting species. Vegetable plots utilizing companion planting principles, perennial sections beginning to establish themselves. Water usage dropped dramatically, thanks to the improved soil structure and water catchment systems, while pest problems decreased as beneficial insect populations grew in response to increased habitat and reduced chemical applications. The farm wasn't merely surviving, it was beginning to thrive in a fundamentally different way than before. Word began to spread locally about the changes at Ward Farm. Other farmers drove by slowly, observing the unconventional approach with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Some stopped to ask questions, which Samuel answered with growing confidence, sharing both his successes and challenges openly. In July, the farm hosted its first field day as part of the grant program requirements, an educational event where other farmers, researchers, and community members could tour the property and learn about the transition process. Samuel had been nervous about opening his farm to such scrutiny, but Olivia assured him that sharing knowledge was an essential part of building a more resilient agricultural system. "People need to see real examples of these methods working on actual farms," she said as they prepared for the event. "Academic research only goes so far in changing mindsets. Peer-to-peer learning is much more powerful." The field day exceeded all expectations, with over 50 people attending, far more than they had anticipated. Samuel found himself leading tours alongside Olivia, explaining the principles behind each intervention and how they work together as an integrated system. "The key realization for me," he told a group of curious farmers, "was understanding that these aren't just techniques to apply individually. It's about reimagining the whole approach, seeing the farm as an ecosystem rather than just a production facility." Several local farmers, who had been openly dubious about Samuel's experimental methods, now showed genuine interest, asking specific questions about implementation costs, labor requirements, and yield comparisons. The technical team from the Institute provided data from the first year's monitoring, showing promising trends in soil health metrics and input reduction. As the event wound down, Samuel found himself in conversation with Frank Holloway, one of the area's most successful conventional farmers and a longtime friend of his father's. Frank had always been politely dismissive of alternative farming approaches, viewing them as impractical idealism. "I've got to admit, Sam, I came here expecting to see a mess," Frank said, looking out over the diverse plantings with a thoughtful expression. "But this is impressive. Different, but impressive." "It's been a learning curve," Samuel acknowledged. "Still is. But the systems are starting to work together in ways I never expected." Frank nodded slowly. "Your dad would have been interested to see this. He always did say you had new ideas he couldn't quite understand." After a pause, he added, "The Institute people tell me you're collecting yield data." "Comprehensive data," Samuel confirmed. "Yields, inputs, soil metrics, water usage, everything quantifiable. Happy to share it with you when the season's complete." "I'd appreciate that," Frank said, extending his hand. "Might be time for an old dog to consider some new tricks." As Frank walked away, Olivia appeared at Samuel's side. "You've just accomplished something remarkable," she said quietly. "Frank Holloway influences farming practices across 3 counties. If he starts implementing even some of these methods, the regional impact could be significant." "I'm just showing what's possible," Samuel said modestly. "Everyone has to find their own path." "True, but you're becoming quite the pathfinder," Olivia said, her expression warm with something beyond professional approval. The success of the field day solidified Samuel's growing reputation as an innovative farmer in TAS. Transition. Extension agents began bringing visitors to see specific aspects of the farm's regenerative systems. A regional agricultural magazine featured Ward Farm in Belaine. An article about climate-resilient farming practices. Lily's science teacher asked if her class could visit the farm for an environmental education field trip. Through it all, the partnership between Samuel and Olivia deepened, their professional collaboration gradually blending with personal connection. They developed an easy rhythm of working together, anticipating each other's thoughts, building on each other's ideas. Their shared vision for the farm expanded and evolved as they discussed possibilities far beyond the initial 3-year program. One evening in late August, they sat on the porch after a long brush day of soil sampling, watching fireflies rise from the fields as dusk settled over the farm. Lily had gone inside to call a friend, leaving them in comfortable silence. "I received a job offer yesterday," Olivia said suddenly. "A prestigious research position at a university in California. More money, more resources, significant career advancement." Samuel felt as though the solid ground beneath him had suddenly shifted. "That's impressive," he managed, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Congratulations." "I haven't accepted it," Olivia said, turning to look at him directly. "Why not?" Samuel asked, heart suddenly pounding. "It sounds like an incredible opportunity." "It is," she agreed. "On paper, it's everything I've worked toward professionally. But I've discovered something important over this past year," Olivia said carefully. "Academic research matters, but so does direct engagement with farmers like you, seeing theories become practice, ideas become reality, making a tangible difference in specific places, rather than just publishing papers about general principles." Samuel nodded, understanding her dilemma, but still feeling the weight of potential loss. "You've certainly made a difference here." "This farm has changed me," Olivia admitted. "This work with you has changed how I think about my research, my career goals. I came here focused on agricultural systems, but I found myself increasingly invested in the human elements, the farmers who make decisions, the communities affected by those decisions, the relationships that drive change." Samuel took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Are we still talking about your career, or is there something else you're trying to say?" Olivia's smile in the gathering darkness was both vulnerable and certain. "I think you know that my interest in Ward Farm has become inseparable from my interest in its farmer." The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Samuel reached across the space separating them, taking her hand in his. "While you're weighing your career options," he said quietly, "you should know that there's a place for you here professionally and personally if that factors into your decision." "It factors significantly," Olivia said, her fingers tightening around his. The moment was interrupted by Lily bursting onto the porch with news about her friend's new puppy, but something fundamental had shifted between them. A possibility acknowledged, a future glimpsed. The harvest season brought the first full measurement of the farm's transformation. Crop yields were more consistent across fields than they had been in years past, with significantly reduced input costs, creating a better overall financial picture despite the transition process. Soil tests showed marked improvements in organic matter content and microbial activity, confirming that the foundation of the farm's health was being rebuilt from the ground up. Most notably, when severe weather struck the region in early October, a week of drought, followed by intense thunderstorms, Ward Farm weathered the extremes with minimal damage compared to neighboring properties. The water management systems captured the deluge effectively, while the improved soil structure had helped crops endure the dry period. "This is what resilience looks like in practice," Olivia told a group of agricultural students who visited the farm as part of their sustainable agriculture course. "Not avoiding challenges altogether, but having systems in place that can absorb shocks and recover quickly." As the year's growing season wound down, Samuel found himself in a position he hadn't experienced in nearly a decade, making plans based on opportunity rather than desperation. The farm was far from fully transformed, but the trajectory had undeniably changed. The financial breathing room provided by the grant program, combined with decreasing input costs and stabilizing production, allowed him to think beyond mere survival. In November, Olivia declined the California position, instead accepting a modified role with the Research Institute that would allow her to maintain her work with transition farms, while developing new research protocols based on the data being collected. The arrangement meant she would remain based in the region, traveling periodically but with a home base much closer to Ward Farm. By mid-December, their professional partnership had openly evolved into a personal relationship as well. Olivia began spending weekends at, the farm, joining Samuel and Lily for family activities and contributing her own ideas to the long-term vision for the property. Lily, who had adored Olivia from their first meeting, was thrilled by this development. "I knew you liked each other," she declared with 12-year-old certainty when they finally had a conversation about the changing relationship. "You both got that same look when the other person was talking, like whatever they were saying was super important, even if it was just about dirt or water or bugs." Christmas that year was a joyful celebration of both personal and professional milestones. The farm stood at the end of its first full year of transition, visibly transformed from the struggling operation it had been. The old farmhouse was filled with warmth, laughter, and tentative plans for a shared future. On New Year's Eve, Samuel and Olivia walked the perimeter of the Oxall property together, taking stock of all that had changed and discussing dreams for the coming seasons. The winter landscape offered a different kind of beauty, the architectural forms of bare trees, the subtle contours of the land revealed without summer's lush growth, the promise of renewal resting beneath the surface. "Did you imagine any of this when your bike chain broke near my farm?" Samuel asked as they paused at the highest point of the property, where they could see the full expanse of the land. "Not specifically," Olivia admitted. "But I've learned to recognize openings when they appear, moments when change becomes possible in ways it wasn't before." "Like a struggling farmer helping a stranded cyclist?" Samuel suggested with a smile. "Exactly like that," Olivia agreed. "Small acts of kindness sometimes create unexpected pathways." As they stood together overlooking the transformed land, the swales curving gracefully across the contours, the cover crops providing winter protection to the soil, the windbreaks taking root at strategic intervals, Samuel felt a profound sense of gratitude for the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a simple act of assistance to a stranger had evolved into a complete reimagining of his farm, his future, and his understanding of what was possible. "The Institute is expanding the transition program next year," Olivia said, as they walked back toward the farmhouse, where Lily waited with hot chocolate and board games for their evening celebration. "They want to use Ward Farm as a primary case study, a model for what's possible when ecological principles and farmer knowledge come together." "From cautionary tale to success story," Samuel mused. "That's quite a journey in 18 months. "It's just the beginning," Olivia said confidently. "The systems we've put in place will continue to improve over time. The soil will get healthier. The biodiversity will increase. The farm's resilience will grow with each season." Samuel nodded, feeling the truth of her words in a way that went beyond intellectual understanding. He had witnessed the land's response to their care, how quickly it began to heal when given the opportunity, how generously it returned their investment of attention and respect. "We should think about installing that solar array we discussed," he said, thoughts turning to the next phase of development. "And maybe expanding the vegetable production for direct marketing. Lily's been researching farm stands." "One step at a time," Olivia said with a laugh, squeezing his hand. "But yes, I think both of those are excellent directions to explore." As they reached the farmhouse, warm light spilling from its windows onto the winter landscape, Samuel paused for a moment, taking in the scene. Here was everything that mattered: the land he had sworn to protect, the child he was raising, the woman who had entered their lives through chance but remained by choice, the work that aligned with his deepest values. "Ready for a new year?" Olivia asked, noticing his thoughtful pause. "More than ready," Samuel said, drawing her close as they climbed the porch steps together. "It turns out the future is a lot more interesting than I thought it would be." Inside, Lily greeted them with her characteristic enthusiasm. already setting up the game she had chosen for their evening entertainment. As they shoed their coats and joined her at the table, Samuel caught Olivia's eye over his daughter's head, a silent acknowledgement passing between them of all they had built and all that still lay ahead, a farm reborn, a family reconfigured, a future reimagined through the unexpected convergence of a broken bike and a struggling farmer who hadn't lost his capacity for kindness, even in the midst of his own hardship. The resilience they had cultivated in the land was reflected in their own lives, the ability to weather challenges, adapt to changing conditions, and emerge stronger through conscious engagement with both difficulty and possibility. What had begun as a professional partnership, focused on agricultural transformation, had evolved into something far richer, a shared vision not just for the land, but for the lives connected to it. Outside, the first snowflakes of the new year began to fall, dusting the transformed fields with a clean white canvas of possibility. Inside, warmth and laughter filled the old farmhouse that had witnessed generations of agricultural transition, now hosting perhaps its most significant evolution yet. The struggling farm had become a place of innovation and renewal, guided by the combined wisdom of time-tested knowledge and cutting-edge research, embodied in the partnership that had begun with a simple act of roadside assistance. As midnight approached, Samuel looked around at his transformed world with quiet amazement. Sometimes the greatest journeys began with the smallest steps: a farmer helping a cyclist, a researcher seeing potential where others saw only failure, a child believing in possibilities her elders had almost forgotten. From these humble beginnings had grown something remarkable, a sustainable future, taking root not just in the soil, but in their intertwined lives. Proof that with the right knowledge, resources, and relationships, even the most challenging circumstances could become fertile ground for unexpected growth. Toward farm, Olivia proposed as they raised their mugs in a midnight toast, and all that grows here. To serendipity, Samuel added with a smile. To bikes with broken chains, Lily contributed, giggling. Outside, the transformed land rested under its blanket of snow, gathering strength for the seasons to come. Inside, the unlikely family unit celebrated not just the turning of the year, but the turning of a much larger wheel, the cycle of renewal that connected human lives to the land that sustained them, the delicate balance of giving and receiving that made true sustainability possible. As the clock struck midnight, marking the official beginning of the new year, Samuel felt a sense of rightness that had been absent for too long. The path forward was not without challenges. Agricultural transition was never simple or straightforward, but for the first time in years, challenges felt like opportunities rather than threats. The struggling farmer and the environmental leader had found common ground, literally and figuratively, transforming not just the land, but their understanding of what was possible when traditional knowledge and innovative science worked in harmony. Their story, which had begun with a chance encounter on a rural road, had become something neither could have imagined, a testament to the power of openness, collaboration, and the courage to reimagine what a farm could be, what a future could hold, and how unexpected connections could lead to the most meaningful transformations. Ward Farm stood as living proof that even the most damaged systems could be healed with the right approach, that resilience could be rebuilt, that balance could be restored, that prosperity could be redefined to include not just financial success, but the health of the land and the well-being of all who depended on it. From the smallest soil microbe to the human relationships that guided the farm's development, everything was connected in an intricate web of mutual benefit, each element supporting the others in a dance of reciprocity that had been the foundation of sustainable agriculture for millennia. As the New Year's first hours unfolded, Samuel knew with quiet certainty that the story of Ward Farm was just beginning, that each season would bring new challenges and discoveries, that the land would continue to respond to their care in ways they couldn't fully predict, that the partnership that had begun with a broken bicycle chain would continue to evolve in directions neither he nor Olivia could foresee. But for now, in this moment of celebration and reflection, it was enough to acknowledge how far they had already come from crisis to opportunity, from isolation to community, from depletion to renewal. The struggling farm had become a beacon of possibility, not just for Samuel and his family, but for the wider agricultural community, seeking pathways toward a more resilient future. And it had all begun with an act of simple kindness. A farmer helping a woman fix her bike, unaware that she would help him fix his farm in return, transforming not just the land, but the trajectory of lives connected to it, proving once again that the most profound changes often stem from the most ordinary beginnings. The story of Ward Farm would continue to unfold through the seasons ahead, but its foundation had been firmly established, built on regenerative principles, collaborative spirit, and the understanding that true sustainability encompassed not just agricultural practices, but the human relationships that gave those practices meaning and purpose. In that understanding lay the seeds of genuine transformation for the land and all who tended it.